Hi, welcome to Lies and Secrets channel. We hope you will have fun with us. Enjoy watching. For our guests, the sound of nature all around us creates a paradise. It was the job of dreams, one I'd put a lot of effort into. In contrast, Aaron is a prosperous businessman who owns his own technology company. I respected his ambition and the life we had created together, but his job takes up a lot of his time and frequently requires him to travel for weeks at a time. I felt alone and isolated because of his frequent absences. When we first got married, Aaron and I couldn't be separated. We would dream about our future together, have romantic dinners, and stroll along the resort's lovely trails. But as his business expanded, so did our separation. Although I recognized the significance of Aaron's work, the nights spent by myself in our roomy resort suite seemed to go on forever. I found myself missing him as the sound of silence reverberated through the corridors. Many times I would sit on our balcony and look up at the stars, wishing he could be there to share the experience with me. After a particularly demanding day running the resort, I got a text from Aaron one evening. "Hello, sweetie. I just arrived in San Francisco. Later I'll give you a call." I grinned at the message, but I was secretly depressed. Truth was that I was once more finding solace alone as the weeks stretched into months. Even though I wanted to spend my day with him so I could hear his voice and feel his warmth by my side, I started to feel as though loneliness was weighing me down. Even the most stunning surroundings couldn't make up for the lack of energy I put into running the resort and making sure our visitors had the greatest time. One afternoon, when I was taking a break from my work, I felt inside. We had a couple donkeys at the resort, and since I've always loved animals, I wandered into the stables. Duke, one of the strongest and biggest donkey, welcomed me. I was drawn to him right away because of his strong physique and kind disposition. I talked to him and brushed his coat. For a while it was a small gesture, but it gave me a sense of security I wasn't aware I needed. For the first time in a long time, Duke appeared to listen without passing judgment. Over the following few weeks I connected with a developing bond at Duke. I started going to the stable more often and we formed an inexplicable bond. I would confide in him completely about how lonely I felt and how much I missed Aaron. I could almost sense Duke's understanding when he nuzzled me. "I understand that you may be wondering how I could develop such a bond with a donkey, but you must realize that I was longing for company." Aaron was rarely home, so one evening while brushing Duke, he became my comfort. I found myself sharing my frustrations with him. "All I want is for him to be here." My voice was shaking when I spoke Duke. "I feel so isolated. I miss having a conversation partner." I became aware of how much I had been suppressing my feelings. Duke seemed to sense my vulnerability, and even though I was talking to a donkey, I couldn't help but feel relieved. The moment of change. I was thrilled to hear Aaron's voice when he called me from New York City one fateful evening, but as we conversed, I could feel the distance between us. I felt as though I was speaking to a complete stranger because he was preoccupied with meetings and deadlines. He said, "Hey, how's everything at the resort?" with his customary enthusiasm. "It's good, just the usual," I answered, attempting to sound positive. "Everyone seemed to have a good time at our packed house this past weekend." "That's fantastic." He looked at something off-screen and said, "I wish I could be there to see it," but his voice trailed off. "I have another meeting to attend. I'll call you later." "'Kay, sure," I said, but I was still disappointed. That night, the familiar ache of loneliness crept back in. As I hung up the phone, I was at the stable with Duke brushing his coat and trying to find solace in his company. I started crying, wondering why things had to be this way. I cried, "All I want is my husband to return." Duke stood patiently, letting me rest against him, and I was oddly reassured by his warmth. I became acutely aware of how much I had grown to depend on him for emotional support, going beyond boundaries. As the weeks went by, my emotional bond with Dup became more solid. I found myself talking to him about my feelings and thoughts for whole afternoons in the stable. He seemed to be the only person who genuinely understood me. I know it sounds crazy, but I started confiding in Duke in ways I never thought possible. I would discuss the loneliness that had taken over my life as well as my dreams and fears. The Duke was my confidant and comforter, and I began to feel bad about the emotional connection we had made. Tears were streaming down my face as I sat on a bale of hay one afternoon. "What am I doing? This isn't normal," I whispered to Duke. In actuality, the Duke was there for me in a way that Aaron wasn't, even though I shouldn't be depending on a donkey for emotional support. I had a strong sense of connection to him, and the more I tried to ignore it, the stronger it got. Aaron paid me an unexpected visit one evening which caught me off guard. He wanted to spend some quality time with her and had cleared his schedule. I was both excited and nervous about how to describe my developing relationship with Duke. I felt a glimmer of hope when Aaron arrived, but as the evening went on, we shared a warm embrace. Tension between us was palpable to me. Our conversation felt forced because Aaron was exhausted from his travels. I proposed that we go for a stroll around the resort after supper. As we walked, I could still feel the distance between us, even though the crisp mountain air was refreshing and I hoped it would help us reconnect. "Is everything all right, Isla?" "Yes, I'm fine." Ronnie said, his brow furrowed in concern. I answered, but it sounded hollow. "Are you certain?" He paused to gaze at me and said, "You seem different. I've observed that you've been at the stables quite a bit." My heart was pounding lately when I realized I had been apprehended. Simply put, I like being around donkeys. All Aaron did was press his eyes against mine, searching for the truth as I tried to sound casual. Realizing that I could no longer conceal my emotions, I inhaled deeply. "Since you've been gone so long, Aaron, I've been feeling lonely and have turned to Duke for solace. I simply don't know how to describe it. The accounting. You're telling me you've been confiding in a donkey." Aaron's expression changed from one of worry to one of disbelief, with a hint of disbelief in his voice. He asked, "It's not as though I demanded defensiveness. Duke has supported me when you haven't, which I realize sounds odd. He listened to Isla when I needed someone to talk to." "This is crazy," Aaron replied, shaking his head. "You can't seriously think that's normal. I know it's not." I admitted, tears welling in my eyes, but I felt so alone and Duke was the only one who seemed to understand me. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." Aaron stepped back, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "What do you want me to say that? It's okay to develop an emotional connection with a donkey? I don't even know how to process this. I don't want it to be okay." I said, my voice was trembling. "I just want you to understand how lonely it is. I thought we had a partnership, but it feels like I'm doing this alone." Path to understanding, we stood in silence, the weight of the conversation hanging heavily in the air. I could see the anger in Aaron's eyes and I knew I had crossed a line. "Why didn't you tell me how you were feeling?" He finally asked, his voice softer. "Now I tried," I replied, wiping away my tears. "But every time I brought it up, you were too busy with work. I didn't want to burden you with my feelings, so I found comfort in Duke instead." Aaron sighed, looking out at the mountains in the distance. "I had no idea you felt this way. I thought we were fine, that you were happy here." "I wanted to be happy," I said, my voice was breaking, but I felt neglected and alone. "I needed you, Aaron. I needed my husband, and when you weren't here." I turned to Duke. He turned to me, his expression softening. "I'm sorry, Isla, I never meant to make you feel that way. I've been so focused on my work that I didn't realize how much I was hurting you." A new beginning. In the days that followed, Aaron and I began to rebuild our relationship. We had honest conversations about our feelings, our needs, and how we could support each other better. Aaron made a conscious effort to be more present in my life, and I promised to communicate more openly about my feelings. We even scheduled regular date nights, and I found myself falling in love with him all over again. But I also knew that my bond with Duke wouldn't fade away. He had been my lifeline during a difficult time, and I wanted to honor that connection. I began to bring Aaron to the stable, introducing him to Duke and sharing the joy he had brought into my life. One afternoon, as we stood together in the stable, Aaron reached out to pet Duke. "You know, I can see why you felt so connected to him," he said, with a smile breaking across his face. "He's pretty special." I felt a warmth spread through my ch*t as I watched them interact. "He really is," I replied, "and I'm grateful for him, but I want you to know that my heart belongs to you." The journey ahead. As the months passed, our relationship continued to flourish. Aaron's business demands remained, but he made a concerted effort to prioritize our marriage. We learned to navigate the challenges together, and I felt a renewed sense of hope for our future. To those of you listening, I want to say these relationships require work, understanding, and a willingness to be vulnerable. It's easy to feel lost in the chaos of life, but if you're willing to put in the effort, you can find your way back to each other. Dear friends, thank you very much for watching. Leave comments, put like, share with friends, and subscribe to the channel.